The main reason I'm making this video is for a group or an ecclesia that came into being during lockdown and has carried on since then, and I'm part of that. And I was asked if I would put down a few thoughts about resonance and frequency in their spiritual aspects. I'll just deal with some of the basics, and I'll put it on YouTube anyway, and if you're not in the Ekklesia, then you're very welcome to be in on it. In one of the ancient creeds of the Church, there are the words, "I believe in one God the Father, the Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, and of all things visible and invisible." Now, resonance is a factor in creation that joins up things in an invisible way. So when we do some illustrations of that, things that are not touching each other will be affecting each other in an invisible way. Another absolute basic to say is that with resonance comes information. Now, there are theories regarding quantum information which say that basically everything is information. And we read in the opening of John's Gospel, "In the beginning was the Word." And a word is above all information. So we should be seeing that resonance carries with it information. We could look at rhythms in nature that are frequencies, the seasons, the tides, a heartbeat, breathing, waves, many things in nature have a frequency that is easy to see. And we can flow with these things, we can sometimes influence them. There are, however, frequencies in nature which are not easily sensed by our five senses. I shan't speak of those today, but for completeness now I say that there are such things. I'll just talk a little bit about them when I come to talk about a cat a bit later on. Now, I play in a string quartet, and when we're playing in tune, and we have to tune our instruments ahead of time to make sure that we start off in tune. When we're playing in tune, there is a sense in which we are greater than just the four players. There is a resonance between us, and that is something that is a part of music. It's something that you can feel. It's something that maybe people aren't aware of when they hear music played very well, but it's something that's very much a part of beauty and a part of communication in music. And part of the power of this in stringed instruments is because they're able to play in what is called just intonation. That is a frequency that has very simple maths behind it. When you play a piano that's tuned to equal temperament, that's very handy. You can play in all sorts of keys, and you can play notes that are readily there, not made by your fingers, but you can't have an instrument that will play in all keys that is in just intonation. It just doesn't work. The maths behind that is complicated. So one of the things that I'll be talking about is how, in the spiritual sense, it's simplicity, it's linking with the way that the world is, the way that the world works. Now, one of the important things in terms of the spiritual aspects of frequency and resonance is finding a resonant frequency. Now, you see this in the practices of monks particularly, but also in some churches, where the resonant frequency of the building is used for what is known as intoning. So if somebody says, "Let us pray," they don't just choose that pitch at random. They choose it because it fits the building and resonates with the building. And one of the things that we'll be considering is when we need to find the right frequency for something. More about that a bit later on. Well, I said I was going to get practical. I have here my violin and my viola. Let's just switch this so that... oh, I can't do it. I'll have to do it this way, that you can see. This isn't going very well, is it? Well, I'll just have to do it without you being able to see them. Well, maybe you can see them like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pluck a string on the viola and then stop it. And if you listen very carefully, you will hear that the G string on the violin is sounding also. Here we go. Now, I don't know if you could hear that, but it's very faint. But if I sing that note, la, you can hear that both the instruments are ringing. And that is resonance. That I wasn't touching either of those instruments, but I was singing that note, and the strings that are tuned to that note, they vibrated. Now, practically and spiritually, one of the first things in terms of resonance is heart-brain coherence. I'm not going to say an awful lot about it because there are people who speak about it much better than me. Heart Math Institute will give you the scientific kind of approach. Nancy Cohen does a brilliant spiritual approach to this. But basically, science since the 1990s has known that the electromagnetic field of the heart and the electromagnetic field of the brain can be in sync with each other. And when that happens, and it's quite easy to bring the two into sync, when that happens, there's a very definite feeling. So heart and brain being in sync is a resonance that you feel. The violin and viola and me singing, that's something that you can just about hear. You might say, well, it's very faint. That's important. We'll come to that later on. Now, frequencies resonate with living beings or living things. And I'll say now that there are two things that go with frequency in this matter of influencing living things. And those two things are intention and emotion. So in other words, it's not just enough, generally speaking, to have the right frequency. But if there is intention and emotion behind it, then that gives extra power to what can happen when we use frequency to resonate with other living things. Now, I'll give you an example. In the letter to the Romans, St. Paul writes in the 8th chapter that all the creation is groaning. Now, you may know a little bit about that. You may have felt that kind of groaning. Now, a groan has got a frequency. And I will tell you about an instance regarding a cat that we inherited with the house that we've moved into. This cat had obviously been mistreated in the past because of the way it behaves, constant meowing and various aspects of its body that show it's had some injuries. Well, I had been considering this matter of the groaning of creation. I won't go into the detail of why it was. It involved an ash tree, but I won't go into the details. And I came back and I heard the cat, Tom is his name, and he was meowing pitifully, and I thought, right, I'm going to see what I can do for you in terms of the groan of creation, because that meowing was a groan. It's distress, it's lack of well-being. So I stroked it a bit. It let me pick it up. Now, it's a very, very edgy cat, but it let me pick it up all right. And I held it in my arms and I started to groan with the groan of creation. Now, if I say that the groan was a deep E flat on the first ledger line below the bass stave, that was what I felt was expressing the groan that was in the cat. And just the meowing carried on, but got quieter and quieter and quieter until it stopped. Now, Tom, that was a few weeks ago, Tom is continuing to become a much happier cat. So there's one instance of a frequency touching a cat, but there was intention in that. I was moved emotionally for this cat. Now, when I was in lockdown on the Isle of Sheppey, one of the things that I did was out of driftwood to make a harp. I'll try and show it to you. I hope you can see it. And this harp I made in order to be part of my singing in the spirit and worshipping God. Well, comes the time, well, how am I going to tune it? And I knew that there was a tuning for it. And I went on a long walk, the walk that you were allowed to do during lockdown, and I could show you the exact place where I started to hear this sound. And this sound, I thought, I haven't got perfect pitch, but I know what a note feels like with my voice. And I thought, I think that's a G flat. And I sang it, and I got out my phone, which has got a frequency thing on it, and checked it out. And yes, it was about 88 hertz, and that was a G flat, near enough. So I knew how to tune the harp. Now I found that as I sang that a part of my body was starting to resonate, and that would be down at the base of my spine. I could feel that was resonating. And I thought, this is interesting. And then, a few days later on in lockdown, I thought, I wonder what the octave above it would feel like. And so I sang the octave above it. And yes, it also made a certain part of my body resonate. And that was, I would say, my heart area. And more than that, along with the resonating was my heartbeat. Interesting. Now, I won't go into the detail now, but what I found was that as well as that octave, that when I sang, and it's right at the top of my range, the G flat that is just about on the treble stave, which is about as high as I can sing, then I also felt, and this was near the top of my head. Now, I won't go into the detail of this, but I found that these resonances in my body seemed to correspond with some of the seven spirits of God. That when my heart was resonating, I felt that I was it seemed to open up things with the spirit of understanding. With the very low G flat, then that was the Spirit of the Lord. And the very high G flat, it was with the spirit of awe, or the spirit of the fear of the Lord. Now I leave that with you. I might say more about it another time. I'll just say that another instance of this was me praying for someone at a distance for healing. Now, this person had a back issue, a long-standing back issue, and I have been praying for him, and as I was praying for him, I started hearing a little sort of tune, quite low down, and I thought, hey, I could play that on the cello. So I did, and I put it on YouTube so he could get the link to it, and said, look, get the most powerful Bluetooth speaker you can find and play it at your back. And a day or two later he said, yeah, my back is so much better. All right, now that again was frequency in healing, but it involved engaging with Holy Spirit about how to pray for this person. This is going a bit long, but I'm going to say one more thing, and that is about radio signals. All around us are countless radio waves on millions of different frequencies. TV, radio, mobile phone. Now, in order to make any sense of those, you need two things. You need an antenna that will pick up and get electromagnetic waves from these waves that are around us, and you need something that will be a tuning circuit, so that you just tune into one of these frequencies. And in the antenna there will be just millivolts, only a tiny electrical current, and countless signals and channels, but the tuning circuit is able to resonate with just one of those frequencies. So you're able to get the program. Of course, you have to amplify it as well. But the point is, there is resonance between the tuning circuit and the waves that are coming in from the antenna. And there is here a very definite parallel between the spiritual messages that we receive. They might be from God, they might be from angels, they might be from interdimensional beings. But notice, it's a still small voice. Well, it is with me anyway. A still small voice. And in order to benefit from resonating with these communications that come in frequencies that communicate spiritual realities, first of all, we need a quiet mind. Too much noise, we're not going to hear the still small voice. We need intention. We need to want to hear God. We need to want to hear from angels, or particularly from our guardian angel. If we are moved to make contact with interdimensional beings, then we need to want to do that in the name of the Lord. And then there's focus. We need to focus. We need to give it time, because these things don't come overnight. Now, there's so much more that could be said here. We could talk about cardiognosis, heart knowing. I think maybe other people in the Ekklesia will speak about that. And also resonance from nature to us, and resonance with nature that we can experience. But maybe I'll speak about that another time. Thank you for listening, and God bless you.